There's no bones about it. If you're a particular generation of PlayStation gamer like me, then there's one video game console startup sound that stands head and shoulders above all others. Hi everyone, it's Aaron here from Push Square, and you join me on this cold, dry, grey Friday morning in a particularly nostalgic mood. Because while I may have built up a certain reputation as being Push Square's resident Vita champion, 10th anniversary of that console coming up soon by the way, today I want to talk about the portable PlayStation console that started it all, the PSP Go. Nah, I'm only joking, of course it's the PSP. So why do I want to talk about the PSP today? Well, not just because it's a beautiful console with a lovely attractive LCD screen featuring portable versions of all of our favourite first and third party PlayStation exclusives, no, because if you can believe it or not, it's 2022 and I recently bought one. How could I not? Admittedly, this is the PSP 2000 model as opposed to the standard LCD original, but I still think it was a good purchase because I recently picked this up on Facebook Marketplace for £20 alongside a boatload of games, but more on that later. I'd be lying if I said that I haven't had an absolute blast revisiting some of my favourite PSP gems, which leads me to question, is it worth buying a PSP in this here year 2022? Many people watching this will likely be wondering why a PSP and not a Vita. Well, simply because as beautifully designed and well made as Sony's second generation handheld is, it lacks the ability to play UMDs. That's Universal Media Discs, of course. Now, usually this wouldn't matter as much, because in the 10 or so years since Vita's release, it was a great way to play some PSP classics, providing you were willing to pay for and download the games digitally. Here's the thing though, and the main reason why I sought to repurchase a PlayStation Portable after selling my original launch model many years ago. Not every PSP game is available on the Vita PSN store. Sure, you have the hits like Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, both utterly excellent God of War titles, and even Grand Theft Auto Liberty City Stories. But what if you want to play the latter's follow-up, Vice City Stories? Go and see if you can download it on the Vita storefront. I'll wait, go on, I dare you. Not there, is it? I know, because I've checked many times. Simply put, some of the PSP's very best games remained locked onto this platform and absolutely nowhere else. I'm not sure the explicit reason for why this is. I just don't know why, say, LEGO Star Wars 3 The Clone Wars is downloadable to Vita, the PSP version, but the Godfather video game isn't. Whatever the case though, one of the chief appeals of buying a PSP in 2022, at least for me, is simple. Playing games that aren't available anywhere else. Legally, anyway. Speaking of which, let's say you do fancy playing either of the two Metal Gear Acid games on a commute. You can rest easy knowing that here, right now in 2022, the second-hand PlayStation Portable market is relatively affordable, and I would go so far as to even say cheap. Now, I might be shooting myself in the foot here by shining more of a light on this aspect, but a big reason why physical PSP games are so cheap and affordable is because there doesn't seem to be a lot of interest from gamers. At least not yet anyway. Whereas boxed games for other retro games consoles, if we can even call the PSP retro yet, seem to be shooting up in price, it's simply not the case with Sony's first generation handheld. Full disclosure, I'm someone who's trying to slowly build up a collection of Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance games on the side too, and depending on the game you want, it isn't all that uncommon to pay upwards of £50 for some of those systems' most celebrated games. Have you checked the price of Metroid Zero Mission for the GBA lately? It's absolutely egregious, even more so if you want a boxed copy. By comparison, many of the first-party releases on PSP are nowhere near that amount, mainly because the console isn't quite that old, and admittedly a lot of the games are in no way as critically acclaimed as say something like The Legend of Zelda Minish Cap. However, if you enjoyed Killzone Liberation, MotorStorm Arctic Edge, Patapon 2, or you think that you would, picking up boxed copies won't set you back much more than £10 or so each here in the UK. Some of them even less. Overall, in case you hadn't already guessed from what I've said, now is a great time to get into playing and buying physical PSP games, because the second-hand market right now, I would say, is pretty fair, and it will be for at least the next couple of years. Again, I know the physical PSP buying market won't be for everyone, but maybe that's exactly why the games are still so affordable. Now, this next point really does just come down to personal preference, I'll admit, but here it is. I think a PSP is worth buying in 2022 because I don't think you can beat playing PSP games on the original hardware. And yes, you heard me correctly, that includes PlayStation Vita. Now, I say this as someone who's gone down the emulation route with PSP games before, and without going into too much detail, there's absolutely no way the likes of Star Wars Lethal Alliance was meant to be played on a blown up TV, or even a laptop screen. I'm sure there are other viable alternative methods out there, potentially on tablet devices, but still, PSP games are of a generation where texture detail and high frame rates weren't really a top priority. As such, many of the system's games honestly look better when compressed and squished a little onto the glory of a 480 by 272 LCD screen. It's no coincidence that certain franchises like the aforementioned Killzone moved from first person to top down in order to suit the portable format better. And the same can be said for the PSP version of GTA Chinatown Wars. At the time, the PSP was a work of wonder because of its gorgeous 3D visuals, I agree, especially when compared to its direct competition at the time, the Nintendo DS. But unless you plan on playing Pursuit Force or its sequel continuously on end, both great games by the way, absolutely no shade intended, then you're probably better off playing PSP games on the original hardware. And as mentioned earlier, that really is your only option when it comes to certain PSP games, because the entire library isn't available to download on the Vita PSN store. So that just about does it for my reasons about why I think a PSP is definitely worth purchasing in 2022, but you might have some different thoughts, especially with the supposedly Project Spartacus on the horizon, which apparently is heavily rumoured to include access to certain PlayStation portable titles, something that PlayStation hasn't even thought about touching or re-releasing since the PlayStation Vita released in 2012. But anyway, I thought I'd round off this video because at the beginning I promised you that as well as my PSP 2000, it also came with a boatload of games, and I thought it'd be fun to just go through them with you now. Oh, so this here, if you can believe it, got all this for 20 English pounds sterling, and if you're abroad, that's a pretty good deal. So I haven't played all of these, but I'll give you some general impressions. Need for Speed Most Wanted. I've never actually played this one before, but I'm rather excited about jumping into a nice, big, sexy, open world racer in PSP, and we'll see how that goes. Speaking of which, I've also got MotorStorm Arctic Edge. Again, not a game I've played. I only played MotorStorm RC, and that was obviously released for the PlayStation Vita. This is a full-fledged third-person racer, if you can even call it that. So again, excited to see what that brings. Next game, Metal Gear Acid. Obviously the turn-based, top-down strategy card game spin-off of Metal Gear. I believe the story told in these two games aren't especially canon, which makes a lot of sense to be honest. But if you want to play Snake in his prime on the PSP, Solid Snake that is, this is one to go for. And again, an example of one of those games that isn't available digitally on the PSN Vita store. Another game I'm familiar with, From Russia with Love on PSP. Classic third-person shooter with cover shooting elements. I believe you get to ride a jetpack. What's not to love? Is a fun time all around. Pursuit Force Extreme Justice. The original Pursuit Force was the first game I ever played on PSP. It was a launch title here in Europe anyway. Never actually played the sequel, but I'm excited to hop from car roof to car roof all over again. Then we've got the Sega Mega Drive Classic Collection, because buying Mega Drive games individually or subscribing to play Mega Drive games, let's be honest, is for chumps. Don't have to do that. One magic UMD disc, it's all here. Assassin's Creed Bloodlines. the only sequel starring Altair as a playable character to the mainline Assassin's Creed series. So if you want to pick up where you left off from the original Assassin's Creed game, I have played this one. I remember it being okay, solid but okay, but again, you can only play this on PSP, it was never ported elsewhere. Next up, Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, one of the PSP's defining titles. You can download the PSP version on Vita, of course, but if you want to get the authentic experience, you want to play it how it was meant to be played, Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, transferring, very important. Then we have Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII. Never played this one, and this is one I'm probably the most excited to dive into this one. Cannot believe this isn't made available elsewhere. Can only play it on PSP. Why didn't they bring it to the PS2 eventually, like they did with certain GTA games? I don't know. But obviously, this is the canonical sequel to the original Final Fantasy VII on the PS1, and with the remake having just released, I'm excited to play as a new character set in that world. Gun Showdown. I bloomin' love this game on the PS2. Apparently this is a slightly expanded version. It might not look as great, but it does have upgradable characters and a bunch of mini games that weren't available in the original version. Next up we've got Rengoku, The Stairway to Heaven. Didn't know that Japanese developers were Led Zeppelin fans, but we'll see how that goes. Never played it. Tenchu will always have a special place in my heart. Never played Shadow Assassins for the PSP, but if it's anything as good as, I think it was Master of Assassins on PS2, then we're in for a fun stealth time. Star Wars Lethal Alliance obviously brought this one up earlier. I think it looks and plays great. One of the few Star Wars games, if not the only Star Wars games, published by Ubisoft rather than obviously LucasArts, Lucasfilm directly. Super exciting stuff, excited to dive in. Next up, we've got Medal of Honor Heroes. Only ever played the demo for this one, which I had to download from some sort of PlayStation store and then actually transfer it via cable to my original PSP. Medal of Honor Heroes 2. I remember first-person shooters, they didn't translate particularly well to PSP because of the lack of a right analog stick, but hey, it'll look pretty and I'm gonna have a good time with it. Speaking of which, Peter Jackson's King Kong. This is one of those few licensed games that I always hear people talk about and they actually leak praise on, but I've never actually played it myself. Is the PSP version any good? It certainly looks pretty cracking going by the back of the box, so I'm excited to dive in. Crash Mind Over Mutant. Obviously Crash Bandicoot in the news right now because having recently been purchased by Xbox. Is this going to be one of the final times it comes to PlayStation? No, because we had Crash 4 obviously a couple years ago. This is a game which probably indicated Crash's slow decline under the tenureship of Sierra and then Activision, but hey, it's a fun old time. 3D platformers, they don't make them like they used to. And now we're getting to the last couple bits now. Grand Theft Auto Vice City Stories, need to play it, not available on the Vita store. It's just as good, if not better, as Tommy Vercetti's mainline story in GTA Vice City. And then rounding it off, another classic, Star Wars Battlefront 2. Classic game. There's only one Battlefront 2 in my heart, and it is the 2006 version by the fine folks over at LucasArts. And Pandemic, of course. So anyway guys, that just about does it for all the reasons why I think a PSP is well worth buying in 2022, as well as obviously the sudden increase of backlog that I'm going to have to contend with. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below. How much do you love the PSP and do you plan on picking one up sometime this year? Because it really is a relatively affordable ecosystem to dive into. But if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more, be sure to leave it a like and consider subscribing to the Push Square YouTube channel for everything else PlayStation related. Until next time, thank you as ever for watching, have a good weekend, and I'll see you in the next one.